Happy Monday, everyone. Here's a look at your weekly U.S. weather outlook. And really, the story is going to be not only this week, but next week. This ridge across a lot of the central U.S. is troughing or storm systems will be pretty preferential across the West Coast, especially the California area, and into the East, especially more of the Northeast. So, right now, we're looking at our jet stream level winds. So, this is 250 millibars, about 10 miles above the surface, as an example. And what we really see is this very strong polar jet, so kind of our polar vortex, in place across far northern North America into the poles, generally where it should be. And I'll show a little bit where the Arctic oscillation that measures this, where that stands right now. And it kind of helps explain why we are seeing this much milder pattern now than we saw earlier in the month. And as we play this forward, you'll see that in general, it more or less stays the same. We see troughing even, reflected in the upper levels across the eastern Pacific into the West Coast. And then you'll see as we head later into this week and the next weekend, we'll see kind of continued rounds and a more stronger trough moving into the Northeast. But even as we go into next week, we see a little bit more of a pattern with some cutoff systems, one across the Southwest and then a deeper system across New England into next week. And really what that means, it's, more continued precipitation, unfortunately flooding issues for a lot of California, likely persisting into next week, and then more winter, cold and snowy conditions for the Northeast. I don't think it's going to be the coldest air we've seen in the season so far, but it is going to be changing for the Northeast a bit. And when we look at our Arctic oscillation, when we talk about, really cold air intrusions into the US, it's usually when our Arctic oscillation goes negative, where the polar vortex becomes a little bit more unstable. It's been very positive over the past week or so, and reflectively, we've seen, the jet stream stronger and staying more north. It's less wobbly. We've seen less sort of lobes of the polar vortex into the US, and the forecast shows that we go more into this neutral pattern. The long-range GFS, which has not been performing very well for the Arctic, oscillation, is showing it going more negative. We'll see what that looks like going into January. But what we see really is our temperatures around 20 to 40 degrees above average for a lot of the central US, and that continues for much of the week. A little bit cooler and more normal for the West Coast. And then, as I mentioned, we have this pretty big system moving into the Northeast later this week, mainly into this week and early next week. That'll bring, again, cold, but not the coldest air we've seen of the season for the Northeast. And again, that looks like that probably continues into a lot of next week as well. Perhaps more of a pattern change as we go into early January. And this is shown in the Climate Prediction Center's outlook for next week. You see very probable above average temperatures for much of the central US, more normal or slightly below average for portions of the Northeast are more likely. Also note that things are pretty cold up in Alaska and pretty warm across Hawaii at the moment. And then if we look at the precip, again, above average looks much more likely for a lot of the US, but especially the West Coast, as we see this active pattern continuing. Now, if we sort of look at what I traditionally show when we look at our mid levels of the atmosphere, sort of the spin in it, the vorticity at 500 millibars mid levels, we're going to sort of see a series of systems that are going to be coming into the West Coast, overriding this ridge, and then digging back into the Northeast. So it's going to mean active conditions for the West, pretty dry and warm conditions for a lot of the central US, and then rounds of wintry precipitation for the Northeast, and again, colder air, especially into this weekend and early next week. So we have one system departing. We have one entering the Pacific Northwest and Western US right now. You see that this pretty quickly moves up along the ridge and digs back northeast as we head into Tuesday and into Wednesday. So that's going to bring a round of snow that we'll look at in a bit here. And then as that happens, we're going to see another series of one quick storm system riding up, but a larger storm system moving into California later tomorrow into Wednesday. That's going to bring an associated atmospheric river, that trough kind of concentrating low level winds and bringing in sort of this vapor river of moisture into especially California. Talk about rainfall, what they've seen and what's expected. And that kind of continues. That trough sort of goes up along the ridge, digs back into the Northeast, and then we have that eventually phasing with a stronger trough, as you'll see here, likely to dig into the Northeast into early next week. Again, that'll probably bring a more significant potential round for snow and colder weather as things remain rather active across California. When we look at The precipitation and the precipitation type, again, I'm showing thicknesses between 1,000 and 500 millibars. This gives us a sense of the precipitation type and where generally that rain snow line is going to be. That magic number is usually around 5,400 meters between 1,000 millibars and 500 millibars, what that thickness is, which is determined by the density or the temperature of the atmospheres. I mentioned that one system currently across the northwest, moving quickly across that ridge in the northeast. Kind of associated with that, you have some pretty strong warm air advection that's going to be bringing mostly snow, but some mixed precipitation kind of on that area of strong warm advection. And then where things do get warmer, some rain for parts of the Northeast. And again, this is mainly tomorrow into tomorrow night and early Wednesday into Christmas Eve there. But you'll also notice you have kind of continued precip across a lot of the western U.S., Northern California north. And you see things really pick up as we go into Tuesday night into Wednesday, another pretty round of heavy precipitation, especially for California, and then a reiteration of that again on Thursday. You'll just notice as we go through here, you're kind of continuing to see these systems generally lift to the north. Things dry out a little bit as we head into this weekend, and you start to see the semblance of this storm system moving into the Great Lakes and Northeast next week. As we look at the winter weather impact, sort of the NOAA's Winter Storm Severity Index, mentioned the snow later tomorrow into early Wednesday for the Northeast. Pretty minor impacts with this. Heavier impacts out west, mainly for, the mountain passes, things like that. And that's especially going to be the case for some of the mountain passes in the Sierras as we head over the next few days, with potential major to extreme impacts, not only in terms of flooding for some of the low-level areas, but just in terms of snow accumulation to some of those higher elevations as well. Now, I do want to mention one thing here. So we have seen pretty active conditions still over the last few days, and generally from a lot of the western mountains have seen, on the order of 1 to 4 inches of rain or liquid equivalent. We've seen really heavy amounts for the coastal mountains in Northern California, Southern Oregon, and the northern Sierra Nevadas here, with some areas receiving upwards of a foot of liquid equivalent precipitation. And when you look at, some of the river levels, you are seeing some that are into minor and moderate flood stage. And then as we go later into the week, we expect some of these to rise up. So for folks, in and around rivers in California, definitely want to keep an eye on things, as these river forecasts are very sensitive to changes and the amount of precipitation that happens, where that snow level line is, and things like that. But when we look at, for example, the atmospheric river intensity index, we do see this really long duration atmospheric river that's in place. The next surge we see here, the integrated vapor transport really ramps up as we head into tomorrow night, and then it kind of lulls, though we see that another increase into Christmas Day as well. And when we kind of look at what this actually looks like in the forecast, we see that, right now things are fairly quiet. We had that one storm system across the northwest. There's still a trail of this weak atmospheric river further south. But as we head again into tomorrow night, we see this increased area and intensity of integrated vapor transport, an agreement between the GFS and the Euro coming in. And then we see another resurgence of that again on December 25th. So pretty heavy rainfall across California, potential flooding. Otherwise, a lot of the U.S. will stay quite warm.